Good evening and thank you for joining us. It is the moment that many people dread and many others celebrate, the first snowfall of the year. And although Thunder Bay only saw a few flurries, communities in the eastern part of the district got a major dump of snow today. This was the scene in Geraldton this afternoon as the roads and sidewalks were covered with several inches of the white stuff. And the kids in that area don't seem to mind as they got a chance to play in the snow for the first time this season. It was a similar story in Marathon, while Nipigon and Red Rock received only a light dusting. Now, according to Environment Canada, the entire North Shore was affected, with many towns seeing a wide array of elements, from sleet and snow combined with high winds to rain mixed with ice pellets. Meteorologist Jeff Colson says overall snow accumulations will be between 15 and 20 centimeters in Greenstone and around Marathon. Thunder Bay could see rain mixed with snow tonight, along with Thursday and Friday. Fiona will have more on the snow situation coming up a little later on in weather. Meanwhile, thousands of hydro customers were affected by the weather this morning, both here in Thunder Bay and in the district. Heavy winds were knocking over trees and branches onto power lines. More than 2,000 Thunder Bay hydro customers, including some schools, were without power as early as 6:30 this morning. The Catholic School Board was forced to close Holy Cross School and Our Lady of Charity, and students were bused home early or picked up by parents. Hydro crews were busy on Wardrobe Avenue, fixing some of the power lines that were affected. The largest outage was in the northeast corner of the city around County Park, along with a smaller outage off West Arthur Street. Power was restored to both hours before noon. Hydro manager Andy Armitage says they are still keeping an eye on the weather.
This morning, so we should be all good to go. Looks like the storm's calmed down a little bit, but still watching.
Power was also cut along a stretch of the highway from Scriber westward. Hydro One's website says repairs in all areas are expected to be completed by the end of the day. Soccer teams will soon have a new home here in Thunder Bay, at least until 2020. This after City Council signed off on a temporary zoning bylaw last night, allowing the use of a former sawmill building on the waterfront as a soccerplex. The vote came despite some objections from a local resident concerned about the possibility of industrial contamination. And Westfort residents are asking City Council to stop a proposal to sell off their local neighborhood parkette. More from Shelley Lee.
For now, this large building on the former Northern Wood property sits empty, but soon it'll be used by up to 2,000 recreational soccer players. On Monday night, local soccer groups, including Soccer Northwest and the Thunder Bay Chill, came to council asking for a temporary bylaw amendment that would allow them to operate a recreational facility on the industrial site until 2020. Organizers say that's long enough to find a more permanent solution. There's no word on total cost, but Chill President Tony Calistro says it's already in the six-figure range.
We are probably looking, we don't have our final costs yet, but we're probably looking at anywhere in the $150,000 range. Obviously, the turf field is the highest expense.
Opposition came from an unnamed community member who hired a consultant to talk about the safety risk of playing soccer on an active industrial property.
As a former planner, it seems kind of odd that a site of known contamination, no record of site condition, no information relating contamination was requested.
But city planners say they don't see that as a concern, especially as the soccerplex would be temporary. The amendment was passed and ratified unanimously. Calistro says turf is already on site and the soccerplex is expected to be running by next month. Meanwhile, Thistle Crescent residents were asking council to stop a proposal to sell off their local parkette. The city has plans to sell two parkettes, one on Thistle and one on Black Bay Road. Staff say the spaces aren't needed as there are other parks like Green Acres nearby. However, residents say that's too far away for toddlers who are becoming increasingly common in the neighborhood.
There's 4- and 5-year-old kids walk around our Crescent and go to that park, and it's safe, and everybody watches out for them. You cannot send your kids anywhere, we're far away like that. There's kids moving in all the time. There's one across from me now with 4 little kids already.
Another parkette on Holly Lane was also slated for sale, but city staff removed that property from consideration after local opposition. City Council will make a decision on the parkettes next Monday. Shelley Lee, TBT News.
Meanwhile, Thunder Bay's Anti-Racism and Respect Committee says the public is expecting city leaders to take a more active role in fighting racism. That was the key message coming out of a special council meeting last night, during which councillors were presented with a snapshot of racism in the city. The meeting started with an overview of the city's current situation. Councillors emphasized the good work Thunder Bay has done in fighting racism, but acknowledged there is still more to do. Committee members spoke about the importance of council members acting as leaders in the fight against racism, and they say people were upset that only one city council member attended the inquest into the deaths of the 7 First Nation youth in Thunder Bay. Committee Chair Amina Abubakari says individual actions like that are just as important as large-scale efforts.
Programs don't solve everything. I know everybody wants programs. There's so many things you can do personally. Just, when you see somebody of an indigenous person or a minority of a different race, acknowledge them. Just smile, say hello. Because what you get sometimes is what we call, the minority call the looks. They see you and they give you that evil look, and it's like, what are you looking for here? And yeah, when you get that, you know what is coming.
Councillors also asked for specific budget items that could be acted on quickly. The committee says it will provide some options for City Council in the future. A bribery case against Premier Kathleen Wynne's former Deputy Chief of Staff and a local Liberal fundraiser has been dismissed in a Sudbury court. Pat Sorbara and Jerry Lougheed have been accused of offering a would-be candidate, Andrew Olivier, a job or an appointment to step aside for Wynne's preferred candidate in the 2015 by-election in Sudbury. Judge Howard Borenstein granted a directed verdict application from the defense that called for the charges to be dismissed before the defense called any witnesses. The judge found Olivier could never have been the candidate because Wynne had already decided to appoint former New Democrat MP Glenn Thibault. He says that means Sorbara and Lougheed could not be found guilty on Election Act bribery charges. He then directed that they be acquitted. Queen's Park has officially passed the act to create 2 new electoral ridings in Northern Ontario. It's the final step in a process that started nearly 2 years ago and has drawn both praise and criticism. The Far North Electoral Boundaries Commission held several open houses across the North earlier this year to see how and where new ridings could be created. The 5-person commission recommended creating 4 new ridings out of 2 existing ones. The northern, mostly Indigenous portion of Kenora Rainy River will be split into the new riding of Kiiwetinoong. It will also include Sioux Lookout, Pickle Lake, Ear Falls, Red Lake, as well as dozens of First Nation communities. In the northeast, Timmins James Bay would be split into the riding of Timmins and Mushkegowuk James Bay. The electoral changes are being praised by the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association because of the vast geography in the north. But Nan Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says some First Nations are concerned, as they were led to believe both new ridings would be mostly Indigenous, but Mushkegowuk is mostly Francophone. The 2 new ridings will be in place in time for next year's provincial election. A major construction project on the Confederation College property appears to be moving ahead on schedule, despite the ongoing picket lines around the college property. Construction began in April on the Tech Hub, which stands for Technology, Education, and Collaboration. The $18 million project is being built by Penco Construction. The 42,000 square foot structure will be attached to the McIntyre building. When the strike by full-time college faculty began last Monday, workers on the construction site had apparently walked off the job in support of the union. That only lasted for a day or two, and since then, the crews have returned to work.
We had a number of different unions that were affected by our strike, and in solidarity they walked off the job. They were ordered back to work, and so we are really honoring and respecting that they're in a very compromised position as well as we are.
Well, I've heard that had occurred. I've got no direct knowledge of that, but we chat with Penco. Penco is our overall contractor. We've asked them, do they anticipate any delays, and ultimately the delay is to open next spring, and they've indicated they wouldn't anticipate any delay in that date.
The original timeline had that project being completed in April of 2018. A Dryden man is dead following a single vehicle mishap near the community yesterday. According to the OPP, the incident happened Monday morning around 10 when the vehicle left Highway 105 and came to rest in Cliff Lake. Police say the driver was pronounced dead at the scene. He's been identified as 24-year-old Dylan Hyatt. The cause of the crash remains under investigation. Bus passengers looking to travel between Thunder Bay and Fort Frances no longer have Caribou Coach as an option. The bus line has canceled the route due to low ridership. But there is an alternative. Carlisle Facette has more.
For nearly a decade, Thunder Bay's Caribou Coach operated regular bus routes to Kenora, Greenstone, and Fort Frances. The Kenora and Greenstone routes were canceled 2 years ago, and now the daily Fort Frances route is gone as well. Bus line owner Sandy Smith says it's just not feasible anymore.
Over the last 10 years, the ridership has diminished to such a point that it just can't sustain itself anymore. There's a common misconception out there from other carriers that we receive funding from provincial and federal levels of government to keep those runs going, and that's not the case.
Caribou will now use its 6 buses for charter services only. Smith says the cancellation of regular routes can also be blamed on increased competition from people who don't use buses. Newcomers like Kelly Coach, run by Kelly Haney, drive more compact vehicles and operate on an on-call basis to Fort Frances and surrounding areas.
There's no other way of actually getting in and out from Thunder Bay out of Coquitlam to Fort Frances, so that's my option. That's an option, is them to call me. The reaction is really good. I've been getting a lot of support from out of Coquitlam, and people are happy, and then actually been calling me, so I've been making a lot of trips lately.
For the larger carriers, Smith says part of the problem is the Ontario government allowing other smaller operators to take their business who don't seem to have the same strict rules and regulations that Caribou does.
We cross our T's, we dot our I's, and yet there are so many other operators out there that the Ontario government has turned a blind eye to, ones that are running without operating licenses, carriers that are operating without following the driver's hours of service laws, as well as other carriers that simply just do what they feel when they want to do it.
With Caribou Coach operating exclusively as a charter in the area, it means there's no regular service between Fort Frances and Thunder Bay. Haney is hoping to change that with Kelly Coach, saying that he wants to develop a fleet and eventually operate a regular route in the region. Carlisle Facette, TBT News.
A section of Hilldale Road has been closed to traffic for a couple of days due to construction. Hilldale, between Gemstone Drive and Fenwood Drive, was shut down this morning as crews began work on upgrading water mains in the area. Construction will wrap up tonight at around 8 o'clock and will continue tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Local traffic will be permitted, and motorists are asked to exercise extra caution around the area while obeying the posted detour signs. Well, the days are getting shorter and Halloween is just around the corner, so what better way to get into the spirit than some scary fun in the dark at the 5th annual Slate River Slaughter.
You flow too! Hello, Opa.
He may or may not jump out at you. It's just one of those things you never know what could happen in the pitch darkness. The festive Halloween display is located at this property on Highway 130. For the past 4 years, owner Thomas Parsons and a group of ghoulish volunteers have been scaring the hundreds of visitors who dare to enter. Parsons says, although some people do run out screaming, it's all in good fun and for a good cause. Donations are collected on site and benefit both the Humane Society and Grace Place on Simpson Street.
When you enter the driveway and walk through the property, you never know what's alive and what's not alive. Some are static, some are actors. You don't know who's going to come from where or where they're going to come from.
I got scared.
But it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was wonderful, terrific. We're still nervous. We're afraid to go to bed at night.
Scary. I was pretty scared and there was lots of monsters.
The Slate River Slaughter runs every night until Halloween from 6:30 to 9 o'clock and until 10 o'clock this Friday and Saturday. Enjoy, but be prepared to be scared.